All right, thank you guys for joining us today. We have Cell Technologies with Rian Sharma.
Well, good morning, everyone. So Cell Technology, we're a clinical stage biotech company advancing the first, I'm proud to say it, it's the first pivotal trial in North America for osteoarthritis using stem cells. We are a platform technology. The technology came based on our work in the last 10 years, being able to solve the riddle of making stem cells effective in actually, I don't want to say reversing aging because it's a catchword, but it's healing diseases and advancing therapeutics to the market. Our markets are massive. The osteoarthritis, the first asset alone is an $11 billion annually, and we are preparing after that to advance other assets to the market. We are actually now in the process of raising $35 million, starting with 5, just through an IPO, so we can advance our other assets and launch our pivotal trial. We're aiming for an EMA, which is exclusive market authorization, which gives us exclusive access to the market in Canada and then in the US as well. So this is one of the defining moments for a physician in medicine. So when I started working on stem cells in the last 10 years, I was called crazy, a little bit on the wacko side, because I'm working with cells instead of small molecules, because they're easier and better. But this what made me confident that we were on the right track. We were actually going to change lives. And this is a patient that came to see me about 10 years ago she had lupus, ended up on steroids, ended up with severe necrosis of her joints, lost the capacity to walk. By the way, everything you see is peer-reviewed. It's a published paper. We had the authorization of the patient to show the face, and we also, the reviewers of the journal actually requested that they speak to the patient at the time. So when the patient came, they were not a candidate for replacement just due to the severity of the condition and their age. And you can see she cannot weight bear on the right leg, and there's a clear deformity in the left knee as well. It's caving in. And she's just using her hip to move, basically lost her life. Surgeons told her, come when you're 50, maybe we can replace the joints at that time.
And you can turn around now?
It's always a humbling moment because younger patients are very patient and they don't complain and they're always smiling. So it was such an experience to work with. And you can see her smiling through adversity, which is very humbling.
Go for it.
And then this is after the treatment. This is 6 months after the treatment. By the way, that was, she continued to do better. She now has kids, got her life back, picked up Zumba, and I knew we were on the right track. That was one of our early patients, but we have so many stories like this, and we made it to Reader's Digest because many of our patients went having very similar results in terms of getting their lives back. I'm proud to say that I work with a team that is smarter than myself. Our teams are veterans in the field of biotechnology, from manufacturing to KOLs in the field from Stanford to world leaders in the field of cell therapy. We are quite confident in our team and our capacity to manufacture and run properly conducted clinical trials. The market that we work with is a huge market. I mean, I always tell people, if you don't have arthritis, then the patient sitting next to you has arthritis. Everyone's going to end up with back pain at some point in their life. I think once humans decided to stand, they got us in business. And the market is actually massive, not only because of the disability impact, like about $800 billion annually lost, the decrease of quality of life and suffering that we see, and the opportunity in accessing the market as well. The challenges that the patients have are the lack of options and the standard of care. And we are able actually to not only offer them a relief of their symptoms, but help them get back. And I'll show you in the data how we help actually patients get back to their life, get rid of that disability. It's usually said if patient goes on disability within 6 months, the chance of them going back to work is less than 80%. And we showed with our data that we're able actually to push them back. Again, we are a platform technology. We're focusing on osteoarthritis right now, but we are expanding to other diseases in the future once we advance one asset at a time. This is a typical journey of a patient with osteoarthritis. I mean, it's about a 10-year of suffering, but they run out of options in the first couple of years. They end up with non-steroids, opioids, and then there is two options, hyaluronic acid, which is an injection to the knee, or cortisones. Those ones, once they lose effect within the first couple of years, the patients end up with nothing until they may end up either with a knee surgery, let's say a replacement, which costs about $45,000, or they end up with a spinal fusions, for example, and those have a very poor outcome historically. Our technologies, again, we have the autologous and allogeneic. The autologous meaning when we take the patient's own stem cells and we process it and re-inject it, and then our allogeneic, which switches the model to a fully scalable model where we think of the Botox. You go to the doctor, they're going to open the fridge. In our case, they open a bioreactor, take the stem cell and inject the patient directly, making it much more easier through the supply chain just to send them directly. This is how we change the patient's journey. So we are able to either prevent the replacements, as you saw with that patient, or we delay it at least 5 years. And we're always conservative. That's why we say 5 years. We have so many patients now at their year 9 that did not require a replacement. And the cost is a fraction of that, of the whole journey, let alone the replacement. It's about $21,000 for the whole procedures. This is some of our clinical trial outcomes. I do have all the data published in the appendix, all the peer-reviewed data. We showed 60% reduction of pain, 90% improvement of function, 80% stoppage of opioids. Patient independently stopped that, 90% regeneration of the discs. It's what's crazy because it always seems nice and cool. And, you know, if you're an analyst, you're going to look at the numbers. But I always want to remind people there's a human behind every story. The patient that you saw, she had a 70% improvement in symptoms. That's how medicine works. And 90% to 60% is very good. I remind people your average blood pressure medication works at 20% of the time. So having a 60% will really changing lives of patients. This is where we are in terms of our milestones. We finished our early trials. We already had our pre-IND meeting and approval to launch the pivotal trial, and we're aiming for that exclusive market authorization, and we're aiming to expand as well to multiple markets after that. We are in advanced discussions with pharma to license our allogeneic platform as well, in close relationships with the strategic partners. Those are some of the milestones that we did in terms of the scientific aspect. We conducted the early trials. We had successfully the first clinical trial treating facets with stem cells in the world, and it was a good trial. We are the highest published clinical program of stem cells, and we had a successful IND meeting just recently, and we're submitting now very shortly. Those are our next steps. So we're looking to launch the trial soon, monetize on the first regulatory approval, and monetize on the licensing agreement as well, and then expand across globally. We're raising $35 million through probably a public vehicle. We're starting just with a private placement of 5, so we can just launch the trial and some operational costs. But our plan is to launch the other assets of the allogeneic as well and conduct the studies globally. We are proudly ahead of all our competitors by at least 5 to 7 years. And I think based on this, on where we are and where we're going, I think we're going to continue to be the leaders in the field. And we're quite confident that we're going to get to the market before any of them. Again, just to recap, we are proudly the first, fingers crossed, clinically approved to the market stem cell treatment for osteoarthritis in North America. And we do bring a solid background of science and evidence-based data behind that approval. And proudly, that's why I say our pre-IND meeting was a very pleasant conversation with the regulators. And we are looking to expand our other assets as well and advance them to the market. I always remind people, this is what I was told 10 years ago, and I was called crazy. And right now we say it proudly. I mean, many of you, if you work in the healthcare field, you know, right, like stem cells right now are considered almost standard of care in oncology, cancer, CAR-Ts, and it's going to come and become also standard of care in many other diseases. I think with the future coming, the cost is going to start dropping down significantly. It dropped down in my lifetime, like the last 5 years, from a $150,000 manufacturing a dose to right now the cost is less than $10,000. So you can tell the trajectory is gonna make my financial sense in terms of manufacturing and giving patients their lives back. I'll stop here. Maybe if you have guys any questions. I have a bunch of clinical data. I don't want to bore you with. I'll get more business questions. Yeah, go ahead. No, so private placement, and then we're going public, so an IPO or RTO. We're open. It's the same one. Usually, even if we either NASDAQ or we end up in TSX, or we're ending up in NASDAQ after. So, alrighty, no questions. Oh. What's your background? What's your personal experience? Yeah, let me see. Yeah, well, I have time. I was looking at the time, so I'm going to give you the background story. So I'm a physician by training. My expertise is cell therapy and biologics. I work with difficult cases, so orthopedic surgeons send me the most difficult cases of spine and joints that may not qualify for replacements or treatment. I ended up as a serial entrepreneur inadvertently. I don't like to use that term. I'm a physician and scientist first. But what happened is we developed, just because the cell therapy field is up and coming, we developed technologies that we ended up gene engineering the cells and developing a treatment in oncology. We ended up having a biologic that I advanced to the market in Canada. And I think through the years, our understanding of stem cells became very clear of the role it's going to play. And it's a realistic role. Like, we go from the hype to, the Gartner hype cycle to an area where really there's a place where you're able to give the patients their lives back in a realistic way using cell therapy. And I try to apply this rather than just rely on the M word, the miracle, because, patients in most of the fields we work with are desperate patients, difficult cases, but we wanted to make sure that we advance actually a solid science that lead to not only a good product, but good a company that adds value, not only to the patient, to the shareholders, to like my legacy of like 20 years working in the field of cell therapy. Go ahead. Yeah, good question. So we are right now filing for the phase 1. It's actually phase 1/2. Historically, we have very good rapport and we had meetings with the regulators. They're very comfortable with the data. So we don't have to repeat everything. We're just going to do a phase 2, but with safety. And we've done that with real world trial. We don't have to do phase 1 and 2 and 3. We can do phase 1, 2A, and then 2B. Go ahead. Yeah, so there is something called ICH, which is the International Council on Harmonization. So between Canada and the US, what we usually do is, and that's why we started in Canada strategically, they carry the same file, and you dump it on the FDA, and it's exactly the same. So what we usually do strategically to push assets faster is we go have the meetings with Health Canada. And why Health Canada? I mean, Canada and Australia are always at the forefront of pushing innovation. So what happens is, for example, Canada was the first ever to approve a stem cell prochimal in like 20, 30 years ago for a treatment. So the regulators are always open for new innovations. But what happens is you take that file and you advance it to the FDA and you get just a check mark. And it makes it much faster because obviously the FDA reviews way more files than Health Canada. So you don't have that luxury of sitting and having conversations with them. Strategically, what we're doing is we're launching the trial and then going to the FDA with more data of the late phase, so we know we're gonna be de-risked as much as possible. Yeah, so we had about $8.5 million invested in the last 7-8 years, and then I mean, right now we're raising at a $28 million valuation. Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of patients with knee pain and back pain, but most of them actually either referred by the orthopedic surgeons. A lot of them are referred to us by family doctors who know that their patients don't qualify. Or what we've seen in the last 5 years is a pivotal shift because many patients are more educated now, and they don't want to go under a spinal fusion procedure or like aggressive treatment. And I always joke and I tell our med students this, but it's going to be true. If you walk to a hospital and you see like those old paintings of doctors giving a patient wine and chopping their leg off, that's what we do with spinal fusion. We basically hammer everything so we prevent them from moving, and that's going to go away. A success rate is 40%, 60% actually. If they don't get better, get worse. So a lot of patients are now more educated, and it's scientifically sane. You don't want to go do a spinal fusion that I can't reverse. If we do our treatments, and let's say you fall out of the, 20% cases that fail, you haven't lost anything. You end up actually, you can go to a replacement after that. Whereas if you go replace it and you have any issues, you can't reverse back. I can't inject titanium with stem cells. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, correct. Yeah, and in Canada we are, yes. Well, it's not easy. I wouldn't say it's easy, but what happened is, we've been having discussions with the regulators for quite some time, and we use the pathway of Botox in Canada because Botox dominated the market for 8 years. No one was able. Again, we're very cognizant of the market sizes, and that's why we start strategically somewhere and switch the other. But that gives us at least 100% of $3 billion annually in Canada, and then we go to let's say realistically 3% of market in the U.S., and that gives us about another $10 billion annually. Go ahead. Yeah, good question. So historically, while being a scientist, I actually ended up working with public listed companies, and we started by, I was the one building their clinical programs, and those were oncology companies. So we were advising on how to build the program. I ended up actually building the clinical program, advanced it through phase 2. I did that with multiple companies and ended up on the board of directors of one of the companies as well. For quite some time. So I do have experience with public markets and being on the executive side of things. I am semi-retired in medicine. I just don't want to lose my license because once you lose it, you don't get back. So I work about 8 hours a week in medicine, just basically supervising doctors, giving feedback, reviewing difficult cases. And then most of the time it's actually taking care of the company and working with the amazing teams we have to just advance the assets. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, the challenges? Yeah, good question. So it used to be a bigger challenge. I think in the last 5 years, a lot of the burden was lifted off, thankfully, actually, to CAR Ts. Manufacturing is the biggest challenge in cell therapy. Many companies learned the hard way. We were just watching, luckily. Sometimes first to market is not best historically. So some companies actually were the early ones, the Prochymal, all those companies. And then we learned from them few things in manufacturing and supply chain. The challenges with stem cells is that you have to be able to deliver it live and active to the patient. Again, you can't just freeze it and send it to a patient and inject them. I just give the analogy of shipping a baby frozen. Well, it's not alive once you thaw it. And the same thing with stem cells. So the supply chain, the challenges that have already been bypassed by the industry, and being able to manufacture live active cells that actually have the proper biomarkers that we select. Because again, there's a good point you brought about stem cells. It's a very big umbrella of word. If you want to go to the details, I tell people saying stem cell is like saying a vehicle. You didn't say if it's a truck or a sports car. Each one of them does a role. And our role with our cells is to be able to properly identify and isolate and grow the type of cell that would lead to healing versus the type of cell that will lead to killing cancer. And then making sure that we're able to manufacture it and ship it and deliver it to a patient that is live and robust cell. And I can dive on the nuances of this. We have criteria. For example, after shipping, we require that the cell be alive at least 80%. Usually we end up with significantly higher, so 90% viability of those cells and active. So we know we de-risk that problem. Ironically, it used to be one of the biggest problems in the industry. Yeah, so there are two aspects we work with. One of them is obviously licensing or co-development with bigger pharma partners. They have distribution channels, so we're able to collaborate with them on accessing their market. They've been in the market with orthopedic surgeons for the last 20 years. The other one from an aspect of advancing into the technological part of our platform, we are actually looking, and I think it's ahead of time to talk about it, but there are a few targets for us in the manufacturing side or in the side of biologics that add significant synergy to our treatments. And we would be looking at either partnering or at some point acquiring certain ones that we can leverage their technology, but they can't function without us. So there is a symbiosis in actually working with them. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
How do you see part of adoption, getting a code and getting reimbursed in the U.S.?
Yeah, excellent point. So we actually ran this exercise some time ago, and we had talked with Medicare and Medicaid and the Canadian reimbursements. So, and we have very, very good understanding. In Canada, we're not actually getting it covered by the government. It was an amazing experience that we learned. Actually, we follow the model of all the other biologics in Canada that are covered by private insurance, but you don't want to get it covered by the government. Multiple reasons. The government, they have codes that once it's covered under the Canadian Health Act, then they can drop the price from $10,000 to $500. And you can't do anything. And that's why it may kill the product like Prochymal. So we actually step away from that and we leave it with private insurers. In the US, actually, it's baked in our study. We have an economical study model for Medicare and Medicaid. It's always ironic because when I went and sat with those people, I was expecting to have like a difficult scientific conversation. It was 13 health economists. There were 0 physicians or patients on the committee. So all they cared about is how much we're spending, how much we're saving. And obviously it was an easy argument for us because they saw the data in terms of how much they're saving. And then they are totally open, especially right now with the cost dropping significantly. They were open to do, for example, historically, they would cover up to $150,000 per treatment. So when we brought them at $21,000 treatments, it was significantly less than what not only they paid for the joint replacement and the spinal fusions, but the disabilities and the delays to go back to work, the opioids. So it was a very easy conversation with them. And we are considering that in our trial. So there is an economical impact in the study on the long term, and that would kind of slam dunk our approach to get covered. Not really. We're talking only Canada. Yeah, not really. It's just you don't want to dilute the product. I mean, obviously, it's a big discussion about socialized medicine versus private medicine. The Canadian system, that's why, for example, insulin, it costs pennies in Canada and it's so expensive in the US. We do have a plan to start with the private because that was the standard of industry in Canada. So all the pharma companies go through that pathway. And at some point, maybe when the economics make sense, we can negotiate with the province. Because in Canada, it's not, you don't negotiate with like one Medicare, Medicaid. Each province has their own system. So instead of doing this, we just focus on the bottom line and we make sure that we're across everywhere. And then after that, we advance after maybe 5-10 years to a different negotiations. What's the cost allow it? Yeah, we do. So all the data actually is a year at least in terms of the patient. And those are the published one. We do have longer term data on all the patients. For example, like this patient, many others, it's been more than 8. I mean, the longest patient we've had was 9-10 years now. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, go ahead. Yes. Yeah, so we do have 6 patents, and they already passed examination and revisions, Canada, US. It's all about all stem cells, all the platform globally, and all diseases. The disease list is very comprehensive. It's the anti-inflammatory market that we're targeting. We call it anti-inflammatory because most of the destructive diseases come from inflammation, and those are the ones that we know we are able to reverse. We do have a strong moat around it. There is also the aspect in stem cells is the process, is the product. So there's no generics in the field, and you can't copy me, even if though I publish the data, you have to publish your own and show that yours works exactly like ours. Go ahead, you had a question. Oh. Yeah, so you mean injecting inside the joint, local anesthetics? Yeah, so good point. Usually we don't recommend injecting inside the joint. Historically, local anesthetics are toxic for the cells. Usually the treatment, the way it's done is you inject the freezing outside, and then you go inside and inject the product. We actually tested this because obviously some of the anesthetic leaks in. It doesn't have a huge impact on the cells. That would only happen if you really went and flushed, like, let's say 10 cc's, and then you put the cells. Well, you're going to put the cells in a hostile environment. Interestingly enough, the cells actually thrive in hostility. It's a lot of things that people don't think of. Stem cells like hostile environment. That's their job. Their job is actually to sit in a hostile inflammatory area and fix things. So we are not worried about it. Like, I actually appreciate when the joint is more toxic or hypooxygenated because their cells respond significantly better. But obviously you want to increase the odds and not just go and flush it with other products. And that was part of our study design. We made sure that in all the data that we injected, it was pure stem cells injected in there, and not even the sham or the placebo or the saline injected with it. And again, we learned from historical mistakes of other people who would mix it, and then the regulators will tell you, well, how do you know which one is working? And we made sure that what we inject is very pure. Yeah, go ahead.
Was in regard to the exclusivity of once you are great Google, but how long do you have, how many years?
Yes. Yeah, so exclusive market authorization is 8 years, and it starts from the moment you are actually in the market. So the shot clock only starts then. And what's interesting is not only you're exclusive in the market, but the regulators don't allow filings until your exclusivity ends. So this buys you realistically another few years, because then people have to file after you're done, and then the shot clock starts. So you end up with like at least 11 years exclusivity. Correct. Correct. Yes. And then the good thing, again, we don't have generic in cell therapy, so that gives you even longer. Go ahead. Yeah, so in Canada, there is none. Again, we know it's a small market. We always focus on the US as a big competitor market. And there were few, but some of them fell off the map because it's a very tough, scientifically difficult field. And we were ahead of everyone. In Canada, there is 0, which is good. But again, it's a 1% of the global market. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you.